Does everyone here believe there is a racial dating hierarchy?
I would say Singapore is much easier to get dates, or had been when I was dating.
But I think, of course, I think someone else mentioned quite possibly that hierarchy may exist. When it's like my female peers who may have a preference for someone who's an expat or a Caucasian as opposed to someone who's local.
Yeah, so in the gay scene, I think there definitely is a racial hierarchy.
Just do it for the sake.
Up to you. Sure.
Okay, so
Oh gosh.
how would you? Yes. 1, 2, and 3. How would you rank them?
This is they're all very attractive, so I'm not sure I would be able to differentiate between them.
You have to. You have no being PC or anything. You have to.
I'm not being PC here,
Yeah.
but 1, 2, 3.
Oh, so just in that order that they are right now. What
They are in
1, 2,
that
3.
order. Yeah.
Okay, what if I told you that one is actually a very prominent far right figure, Blair White,
Oh,
who's a
then-
transgender? Would you still stick with that?
a far right transgender person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Maybe if I didn't tell you of a political leaning, I'm just exposing to you right now that she is
political
trans.
leaning is a big requirement because I'm at the age where I'm dating for sort of long-term relationships.
Okay,
and
let's
if they're
say for the
far-right,
sake of the
then-
argument, she's neutral. Okay, she doesn't have any beliefs whatsoever, but she's just a transgender. How would you still rank her the same?
I would be very honest and say not really, because it's along the lines of what we and I don't want to make it sound like I'm
Transphobic? Okay.
Of racial preferences in general. Like, yeah, sure, some people prefer to date someone of another race whatsoever. I don't think there's anything immoral about it, but it starts getting problematic once people become predatory about it, right? Like, some people exclusively go after Asian ladies, or some people exclusively go after like white men, or like,
So like the
you get what I
fetish
mean,
of the
right?
race, right?
Exactly, fetishizing the race. That's the word. Thank you.
So I wouldn't say that having dating preferences is just straight up makes you a racist person, but I think you should also ask why these preferences exist in the first place. And if it's something that you can't control, then is there any value to deeming such a preference as racist or not? So
I basically don't mind dating anyone. But I always tell people that, yeah, I like ginger ladies.
Like in your own experiences of like racial fetishization, cuckolding, and things like that, do you feel that when you do like partake in those kind of things, are you being used for your own body, for your own race?
When it comes to sexuality, I feel liberated. Yes, I've done cuckolding, and cuckolding is basically the old, English word. Basically, when a man is not being able to satisfy their woman, they don't hesitate to look for other men, or for their own sexual thrill, they basically ask another man to sleep with their woman. So the group understand what cuckolding is, and believe it or not, I do not do it all the time. When I'm in.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are joined today with a very wide and diverse group of people. We're just going to be discussing race and dating, or their experiences in the dating market. Before we begin, we're just going to have a brief introduction. So, Brian, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Hello, I am Brian. I'm from Singapore, but I'm currently in San Francisco. He, him. Nice to meet everyone.
Great. Good to meet you, Brian. I'm Fred. I'm from the US, but I live in Singapore. And I've been here for 9 years, 9.5, almost 10 years. So, yeah, good to meet you guys.
Yeah, well, my name is Sid. I'm from Singapore. I'm living in Scotland right now, and I'm ethnically Indian. So yeah, that's me.
Navita,
yeah.
Seems like she's
you're
muted.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Hi, this is Navita, based in Singapore, and I'm Indian by race.
Hi
Yeah,
all, this is Shams. Oh, sorry. Is that my turn?
It was SJ then you, but whoever wants to go.
All right, fair enough. All right, sorry.
I'm SJ. I'm English and white, and I'm a gay male, he, him.
Shams?
Hi all, my name is Shams. I currently live in Darlington. I'm from West Africa, Northwest Africa.
Very nice. Okay. So basically, we're just gonna start off on like something really light. Does everyone here believe there is a racial dating hierarchy? So typically how it goes is for the straights or the heterosexuals, they believe that, you know, whites are at the top and then blacks are at the bottom and all the other races are kind of somewhere in the middle. Obviously that differs, you know, for the homosexuals and like top and bottom of how, like, you know, maybe Asian bottoms are like preferred over white bottoms in that regard. Do you believe in this? That has it been applicable to you guys? Has race been an advantage for you or a disadvantage for you when it comes to dating in your country? Why or why not? Brian?
You should start with something light. Wow, but that
Trust me, gets quite deep.
it, as you said, it differs from region to region, country to country. San Francisco is a very unique location with its concerns, and it's to the point where it's a free-for-all in San Francisco, and I want to believe that it's not the case here. It could possibly be the case in many other places. It has not been, for my personal experience, a difficulty or a for my particular race while in San Francisco. That's part of the free-for-all that's happening here. To be clear, however, this is a unique situation. I get more propositions here from gay men than from straight women, for example, even though I'm not personally gay. And it's not a thing that I expect would extend to other places.
Very nice. Fred?
Yeah, I'm looking at your question here. Do I think that there's a racial dating hierarchy? I don't know. It seems like, you know, when I've dated in New York, things were different. You know, it was a different dating scene there than here in Singapore, for instance. I would say Singapore is much easier to get dates, or had been when I was dating. Yeah, Singapore was a lot easier to get dates, I would say, but it wasn't too hard in New York either. So I don't know. I never really thought about that there was like a racial hierarchy. I mean, I think in Singapore, when you're looking at it, there is a supposed hierarchy. Like the Western expats come and they become some, I guess, more sought after. But then the alternative is true. Let's say that you went to New York or whatever, and you would be very well sought after in New York by a large group of suitors. If you were gay, I don't know, but if that is the case, you would see an inverse of what I see here in Singapore and New York. So it is regional, I would say, if there is such a thing. So, but yeah, I that's really my thought on that.
Awesome.
Right.
Nibita, what are your thoughts, Nibita?
I think personally, I've not necessarily experienced that in Singapore, or any sort of racial discrimination within the dating pool. You know, I have dated across races or different cultures, and I've not really seen that from my perspective. But I think, of course, I think someone else mentioned quite possibly that hierarchy may exist. You know, when it's like my female peers who may have a preference for someone who's an expat or a Caucasian as opposed to someone who's local. I think that does exist, and in some instances is more apparent in their preference. So I think in the case of Singapore, it's definitely there.
Huge thunderstorm. SJ, go for it.
Yeah, so in the gay scene, I think there definitely is a racial hierarchy, and this is just an assumption of feeling. I feel like it's more prominent than in the heterosexual community. And I do think it's slightly different than the one in the heterosexual in terms of who sits where. I do think white sits at the top. But I also reflect on the point made earlier that I think it does depend a lot what city you're in and whereabouts you are. So I'm a white male and I'm from the north of England, where a town which is like 99% white, so it didn't really come into the calculations there. In terms of the second sort of part of the question, has it benefited you? I have noticed it a lot when traveling. So I also have red hair, which is an undesirable trait in my hometown in the north of England. But I noticed that when I travel, say in southern Europe, like in Italy, or when I was in Asia, it definitely got more attention than what I would have done back home in the north. So I think it does vary dramatically where you are as well.
Nice. And Singadoomer, you had experiences in Singapore and then now Scotland. What do you feel?
All right. Yeah. So here's the thing, right? Like for me, I used to believe there was this so-called racial dating hierarchy, like when I was in Singapore. But this was during my poly times when I was a fat bastard. So that's that. And during NS, I took care of myself, got my clothing right, and lost a lot of weight, went to the gym, basically got a better profile and all that. And honestly, there's a major difference over there. I mean, like major difference. Like the amount of matches I was getting, the amount of dates I was getting, even like passing compliments of day-to-day things. So I think it's mostly an appearance versus racial thing, because I mean, even in Scotland right now, like I'm getting a decent amount of like matches on my profile, or like even in like when I approach people in pubs and all that. It's all right. I've never felt like there was a dating hierarchy. So that's it.
Shams?
Right. What can I say? I don't know. For a Black person, it's basically the extreme of both, from my perspective, from where I stand. Either when you're dating somebody, they like you because you're Black, or either they hate you because of you're Black. Simple as that. So it's the extreme of both sides. Either, on the website, somebody will say, yeah, specifically no Black, or somebody will say, yeah, specifically only Black. I know people will say, yeah, I don't care who I'm dating, but yeah, in general, that's basically how you come across. Personally, I think that's basically a little bit not okay, because you choose to date someone because they are specifically Black, or you choose to date someone specifically because they are white. But on the other hand, I've been with all races of ladies part. I'm heterosexual. And people have a misconception about Africa when it comes to homosexuality. They think all Africans do not tolerate that. And also, all Africans are free to basically date outside of a Black race. So those are two controversial things that are mentioned. I will elaborate on them later on. For example, if you take a migrant worker from Europe that is working in Africa, it will be hard for them to date a Black girl, or find a lover over there, or a boyfriend, if I might say so. Mainly because of their families they will basically disapprove. And the same way goes when you take like certain countries in Africa, they are much more pro-gay than America, United States is, compared to what you think in the media. So those are basically the 3 points that I will basically elaborate. Thank you.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, can't wait. Poraya.
Can everyone see me?
Yes. Maybe do
Okay.
a
Wait, are
quick
we?
brief intro,
Okay.
like pronouns, sexual orientation, stuff like that. Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Hi everyone. My name is Pariah or Paul. You can call me either one. My pronouns are he, him. I am cis and gay. And yeah, I live here in Singapore. I'm not sure where everyone is from, and I'm so sorry to have come late, but I got stuck in the same storm that we are hearing outside the windows right now. So sorry about that. So, okay, to answer the question, whether I believe there's a racial dating hierarchy, well, I think that the term hierarchy makes it sound very structural and official. And I think that for most people who use the term racial dating hierarchy, many of us think of it more as a conceptual thing that is maybe not necessarily so much bound in rules, but some version of it exists. But it does intersect with many different things as well. So to the extent that there's some kind of preference between different races, I do think that for some people, it certainly does exist. And it's certainly something that they take into account when considering potential partners. But yeah, of course, this doesn't apply to every single person. So I think when it comes to dating in Singapore, it's definitely been both an advantage and disadvantage for sure, depending on who you're talking about, right? If you're talking about having mass appeal, then it's certainly something that perhaps as a Filipino person, it's not. I mean, if you're to make a version of me that's the same in every other way, but just a Chinese version, then that version of me would probably have a wider kind of mass appeal. But I also hesitate to say that it's purely disadvantageous, because if I were to be interested in someone who's Filipino as well, then in that case, it would definitely not be a disadvantage in a sense. So it really depends on who you're talking about.
Fair enough. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details, Shams, do you mind if we run a quick social experiment really quickly? Are you there, Shams? Shams, you there?
Doesn't sound like they are, but
Oh no. Okay, never mind. Brian, you're a heterosexual male. So
yes.
could I run this experiment with you? I'm about to share my screen.
Okay.
It's a little weird, it's a little sus, but I would need
Okay.
you to rank these three ladies for me. You'll see why. Okay, but just do it for the sake.
Up to you. Okay, sure.
Okay,
Oh
so
gosh.
how would you, yes, 1, 2, and 3, how would you rank them?
This is they're all very attractive, so I'm not sure I would be able to differentiate between them.
You have to. You have no being PC or anything. You have to.
I'm not being PC here,
Yeah.
but 1, 2, 3.
Oh, so just in that order that they are right now. What
They are in
1, 2,
that
3.
order. Yeah.
Okay, what if I told you that like, one is actually a very prominent far right figure, Blair White,
Oh,
who's a
then
transgender? Would you still stick with that?
a far right transgender person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Maybe if I didn't tell you of a political leaning, I'm just exposing
so
to you right now that
so
she is
political
trans.
leaning is a big requirement, because I'm at the age where I'm dating for sort of long-term relationships.
Okay,
and
let's
if they're
say
far
for the
right,
sake of the
then
argument, she's neutral. Okay, she doesn't have any beliefs whatsoever,
okay.
but she's just a transgender. How would you
Okay.
still rank her the same?
I would be very honest and say not really, because it's along the lines of what we and I don't want to make it sound like I'm
Transphobic? Okay. Look.
there are, it's hard to say. I am less sexually attracted to trans women than I am to cis women. This is just I don't know how to phrase this in a way that sounds better, but it just is what I have to say. But without ruling out dating a trans woman per se, I just can observe for myself that I've never dated a trans woman before.
Right.
It's
Okay.
just not
And
about
and that would be a perfectly acceptable answer. But if we tie in race into it, it gets a bit problematic. Like
Okay.
even thinking about ranking all these women like that seems a bit taboo. It seems a bit wrong, right? Why do you guys think there is like do you
I-
feel that these preferences are actually immoral, or do you think it's just the nature of things? Yeah, okay, Brian,
not-
you go and then everyone else gets in. Yeah,
Okay,
Brian.
so
Okay, go.
it's just the way that we think of dating right now is a lot of things are app-based to the point where I would never personally approach someone unsolicited. I feel like that is the taboo more than anything else. And so I am used to ranking someone based on their looks, based on the description of themselves, of whether their politics, their inclinations, and so on. And so I am hyper aware of my set of criteria that I think I am attracted to, that has worked out for me for past dates before. And knowing that, I just consistently go with that. And I think that's part of the not objectifications per se, but the classification of things into the set things within the apps that we rely now on dating. They are along the lines where I'm now hyper aware of my preferences because of the free for all of the high frequency first dates that we sort of get. So that's why I know that politics is such a big is probably the biggest like no in terms of dating, and that I have a preference, very strong preference for cis women versus trans women, and both of them dominate, in fact, any sort of preference I have for race. So that in that, I'm not sure whether it's a natural thing, but it's definitely something that's I made hyper aware of because of the way that dating is now facilitated through apps that concentrate so much information into one place.
Fair enough. Okay, but if you were to tie it back to racial hierarchies or racial preferences itself over your other sort of,
I would
yeah.
definitely say that
Would it be
trans
immoral?
people have a much worse time than cis women do, especially with cis men like myself. And that is a lot more fixed in any racial hierarchy or racial structure.
If
The politics thing is
yeah.
a bit different, I think. The politics thing,
if someone had like, sorry, but like if someone like had a racial preference for these rankings and it based off purely of a race, would that be problematic for you? Is that immoral?
I'd say if they made it a general thing, like this race is better than this thing, and it should be the case for everyone, that is immoral. But if you're talking about your personal preference, then you're just describing your own personal sort of preferences and inclinations. That's fine, as long as they don't describe it in terms of general terms, like this race is going to always be at the top and so on. But this is as a cis hetero male saying, so I'm happy to hear. With no,
sorry, Agent P. Sorry to cut in quickly. I heard you earlier, but it's a very wet and windy day here, and my phone was in my pocket. I thought I was unmuted, but I was speaking. You couldn't hear me. I will be happy to come back, Agent P, later on when you finish with Brian. Apologies. I'm still basically 5 minutes out from home. So
Yeah.
sorry, everyone.
Yeah, no problem. Fred, would you want to hop in with your thoughts?
So this is the thoughts about if he were to rank this based on race rather than anything else. I think that if he has a preference, maybe these three, maybe I mean, if he said the Latino one or there's an Asian one, if he has a preference towards one race, then I guess there's no problem. But I guess there might be there would be I think a personal problem if you were saying that you weren't open-minded to meeting other people or even seeing what another person from another race would be like, saying if he were to say that, oh yeah, I won't even meet this Chinese girl or whatever, I would think that would be a personality flaw if he were to say that. Obviously he didn't. So, but yeah, I think if you just said this is my preference, I think that's acceptable. I think.
Nivita?
If that was that where you were going with that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's hard to say, right? Because if everyone thought that way, then it really does become. If everyone thought the way and it's the same way, then it becomes something structural. So I'm still. we'll come back to it, I guess.
Nivita, go for it.
I think preferences, I wouldn't, I guess, classify as immoral. Like maybe like someone else mentioned, maybe a bit narrow-minded because you're either not exposed to or have not been in touch, and therefore some people may prefer women or men or whatever that they're familiar with to some extent. And the other side is I also think it's more natural. You can't really help who you're either more attracted to or I guess less attracted to. It's just how you react when you meet and interact with a person. So I wouldn't say it's immoral and I wouldn't say it's wrong. You know, sometimes a preference is just what it is. You meet somebody and you have a stronger attraction to them than to somebody else. But yeah, if unless it's of course some sort of generalization where you just exempt a particular race from from getting to know them or even giving them a chance, then yeah, maybe then that's a bit more personal and yeah, may not necessarily be accepted.
So as long as it's exclusionary, then you would consider it immoral, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But more narrow-minded, I would say. Yeah, immoral is a bit strong.
Fair enough. SJ?
Okay. So I what's the question? Can you just repeat the question so I know I'm answering it correctly?
Basically, racial preferences immoral, automatically.
I don't think they're immoral, and I think they are perfectly valid things to have. I think you can choose who you date or have sex with for literally any reason, and that's your individual right. I am a bit biased in this, in that I am fairly open with the fact that I do admit I have preferences in race. I think where I throw the spanner into the work is my preference is not to date my own race, which tends to confuse the argument a little bit because usually it's people being exclusionary to everyone but their own race. And I think that's perfectly fine, and that's my decision. Just as I accept if someone didn't want to date me for whatever reason, I accept that and move on.
Okay, Singadoomer?
Yeah, I'm testing. All right. So, in my opinion, right, physical appearance is a major part of like dating. All right, there is no reason for me to enter a relationship if I do not feel physically attracted to someone. So, and when it comes to the topic of racial preferences in general, like, yeah, sure, some people prefer to date someone of another race whatsoever. I don't think there's anything immoral about it, but it starts getting problematic once people become predatory about it, right? Like, some people exclusively go after Asian ladies, or some people exclusively go after like white men, or
So like they
you get what I
fetishize
mean,
the
right?
race, right?
Exactly, fetishizing the race. That's the word. Thank you. And people can be very predatory about it. Like I've had classmates, I've had friends who have been approached because of the fact they were Chinese, and they've always been every single time in these conversations, they always felt uncomfortable, especially when a person brings up, oh, I love Chinese ladies, stuff like that. It really makes them uncomfortable, and at that point it becomes problematic. But if you like someone because of the way they look, and well, that didn't come out right. But again, like if you are physically attracted to someone, and just so happens that someone who happens to be of a certain race, and it starts following a pattern, and like that's the human brain for you. So yeah, that's what I got to say.
So interesting. So you are basically kind of in slight disagreement with Nivita's point here with the exclusionary thing, but you kind of going the opposite way of saying that if you're too inclusionary, if you're too preferential with your race, then you're problematic or immoral. Okay.
Yeah, like if you're fetishizing it,
Right. Shams, and then Porai. Right. I think Shams is still trying to connect to the thingy. So Pore, go ahead.
Sure. So I hate to do this thing where instead of answering the question, we ask a further question to it. But I guess it really boils down to what you define dating preferences to be, right? Because oftentimes when people talk about preferences, they mean a whole list of things that could technically be preferences, but it's really just a shorthand term that can refer to a range of things, including preferences in the sense that they are open to dating any race, but certain races are valued more than others, or are they 100% exclusionary to people of certain races? And then it becomes less of a preference and more of a requirement, right? Since to prefer suggests that it's not 100% binding and not a complete non-negotiable. So I think this matters when trying to answer the question of whether preferences are immoral or not, because I think it's fair to say that everyone should be assessed equally, irrespective of their racial backgrounds. But at the same time, you don't simply choose who you are attracted to. I think when it comes to trying to kind of counter-argue the notion that having racial preferences is morally wrong, people often try to paint it against things like sexual orientation. And I don't, of course, it's not a fair comparison, but at the same time, it bears asking ourselves like, okay, so we take things like sexual orientation to be things that we can't control, right? And I do think that we should read people who have certain racial preferences when it comes to dating a bit more charitably. So I wouldn't say that having dating preferences is just straight up makes you a racist person. But I think you should also ask why these preferences exist in the first place. And if it's something that you can't control, then is there any value to deeming such a preference as racist or not? So more questions and not really a straightforward answer, I feel.
Okay, couple of points that we'll come back to there, but Shams, go ahead. Nice to see your camera on. You're on mute, Shams.
As always, it wouldn't be a Zoom call without somebody saying you're muted. Right. Hi, everyone. Apologies for all the running about. What was the question, Agent P? Fire away.
Right. So are racial preferences immoral? Like you were mentioning how your race can be fetishized sometimes. And this with the media, pornography, there's this whole BBC culture that they're going for, cuckolding and stuff like that. Maybe things that you want to touch upon. Go ahead.
Sexual preferences when it comes to race. I think it's not immoral. That would basically be asking if sexual orientation is immoral. You know, the same way that you do not choose your, you don't have control over choosing your sexual orientation. You cannot choose which race you like, If I'm saying this, please bear with me. For example, me, myself, I basically don't mind dating anyone. But I always tell people that, yeah, I like ginger ladies. I know it sounds wrong. I know it sounds stupid, but I can say that without sound a little bit like casting over races on the side. I hope you understand where I'm going. So it's not like I don't like other races, but my preference is this. This is what I'm going with it. What's the other question?
Like in your own experiences of like racial fetishization, cuckolding, and things like that, do you feel that when you do like partake in those kind of things, are you being used for your own body, for your own race?
Yeah, of course. And
also
basically
maybe, would you want to kind of explain to the rest of the gang who may not know what cuckolding is? And yeah, go for it.
Yes, I'm not afraid of saying this, and I'm not ashamed of saying this. When it comes to sexuality, I feel liberated. Yes, I've done cuckolding, and cuckolding is basically the old, English word. Basically, when a man is not being able to satisfy their woman, they don't hesitate to look for other men, or for their own sexual thrill, they basically ask another man to sleep with their woman. So I'm pretty sure most of the time it's okay in my mind because it's not cheating. It's a consent between the husband and the wife to do so with a third party, rather than going to cheat, having an affair. So marriage people can do this, single people can do this. But as long as it's a consent between the couple to basically have a third party, a third wheel, if you may, in the relationship, then for me, there's nothing wrong with that. Religiously, people might basically say, yeah, something is wrong with you. But that's their opinion, and I respect that. And it doesn't basically mean that I'm a gigolo. No, I don't have time today because my life, you know me, Agent P, my life is basically hectic. I have got my hands in every kind of things, but I make sure that I tell them, look, this is basically something that we do, no string attached. And whatever it is, do not basically bring my name or doing things that can basically jeopardize my work that I do within the community and within nationwide. As long as you understand with that or you're okay with that, then yeah, sure. But if you start basically publicizing my pictures on social media or online or things like that, then we have a problem because I'm gonna basically drag your ass to court. We're consenting to have an adult, a meeting. It's supposed to be intimate and stay between us. Do not publicize it. Don't take it out of the bedroom. Whatever happened in Rome, as they say, stays in Rome in some way. But many people basically conduct this because they think that either they need the thrill in their relationship or they basically have an issue in the bedroom. So whatever their choices is their choices. Who am I to basically judge them on that? I have got my choices. I've got my preferences. It's not the kind of freedom of speech, but this is basically being free of being who you are or who you want to be. This is the way that I see cuckolding. I hope the group understand what cuckolding is. And believe it or not, I do not do it all the time. When I'm in a relationship, I'm basically like monogamous. That's fine. But if my relationship fails, then in that case, I'm free to see whoever I want to see, as long as they are willing to see me as well.
Right.
Did that bring an understanding to the group, I hope?
For sure. Singadoomer, would you like to respond to that, where Shams is kind of profiting or he's benefiting of this like racial fetishization, and it's helping him in his like sexual outcomes, and he doesn't see it as immoral? Do you have anything to kind of respond to that, or do you want to add on to those thoughts?
Well, I mean, personally, I've got nothing much to say. I mean, when it comes to the topic of sexual intercourse, I'm a pretty vanilla person. I mean, you do what you gotta do, man. Yeah, that's all I can say. I don't go into anyone's bedrooms to tell them how to do their lives. So, yeah, do what you want, how you want it. Respect to you, and yeah, that's all I gotta say, mate.
Okay, and free flow discussion. Anyone can just chime in on anything that they feel that they need to clarify, or if they want to respond to a certain point, just go for it.
I guess I would just add to the point about fetishization. I feel like if it's just a hookup, if it's just sex, then I don't think it matters that much if you're fetishizing, if everyone consents into it. And it's only really a problem if you're so this thought isn't fully put together in my head, but I feel like that's only really a problem if it's like within a relationship. Yeah, obviously like going up to people and saying, oh, you're a beautiful Chinese person or a black person or whatever, that's very cringe. But I don't think having preferences for other races is fetishization. Sometimes I think there's almost damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I've noticed this a lot in the gay scene. Like if you are a gay man and you only date your own race, especially if you're white and you only date other white people, you're sort of condemned for that. And at the same time, if you are a white guy who dates people of other races, you're also tend to be like accused of being a fetishizer or similar. So it's almost like you can't really win. And I think people just need to sort of, to be blunt, I think people kind of need to mind their own business. It's actually one thing that I actually say sometimes is I've gotten more grief for being in interracial relationships from people than I have homophobia for being gay, which is quite weird. But my thoughts on this all tends to boil down to, as long as you're not hurting anyone and it's all consensual, it's none of your business who you choose to date for literally whatever reason, be that race, hair color, sex at birth, it's no one else's business but your own. As long as you're not entering relationships to be abusive, then yeah, it's just your personal business.
Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, I would like to come. Definitely, and I second that, SJ. But I also want to ask, when it comes to interracial dating, again, please do understand that me personally, I do not have a problem at all. But it does basically, I do understand where they're coming from when they said, oh, I would like to date this kind of race of people or specifically that. Yeah, selection or, pre-selection is a human nature. We all have this in our core. Either you accept it or you lie about it. You still basically have preferences. But it's just strange that somehow people think, it's the same way that Caucasian people would not want their children to date a Black person. I know that for a fact. It's the same, or they will not show it, at least here in the Western countries, they will not show it. I don't know in Asia or Southeast Asia, probably that's even straightforward, like it is in Africa. So my point is, in Africa, if you're dating someone as a Caucasian person, basically the parents, if they do not agree, if they are not moderate, they wouldn't hesitate to let you know about it, which is basically something some people are forgetting about, and it's all due to basically the idea. I know every time a Black person opens their mouth, they talk about racism, but it's the culture of the racism, how it's embedded in the Western culture, in the Western society, to see Black people as inferior or Black people as people to use. I'm not saying everyone does do this, but and even Asian culture, I'm sorry, if you take it in Asia as well, it's the same thing. Everywhere around the world, Black people are seen as inferior race to everybody else, which is obviously not true. I'm not saying that anyone here is accepting that. And even if you do, that's fine. I understand that's your views, but that is not helping the interracial dating. Already, some of our parents back in Africa, they do see or they do hear how we are being perceived in the Western countries. And if you said, oh, I'm dating this, oh no, here we go again. It's basically, I know you're going to laugh when I said it, it's basically the film that is going to happen, Anyone remember that film that just Daniel Kaluuya was in? That the Black guy dated the white girl and then basically they lobotomized them. Anyone? No?
Yeah,
Okay, that's.
I think I know. It's the one where they steal their bodies or something.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, that's it. SJ. Good point. Yeah. So anyway, it's basically a kind of like a jokey film that they did that, white people are stealing Black people's body because they're athletically better and
it's Get Out, right?
There you go. Yeah, I know Americans will know that. So I didn't want to say the name, but yeah, I wanted you to look for it. So Get Out is basically similar to what our parents are thinking when we say, I'm dating a white person or I'm dating somebody that is not non-Black. But it's not always right because our parents are wrong. And don't forget that they basically are conscious because what happened to them during the colonialism time. I know I'm bringing this, people will think, but that has nothing to do with dating or racing. But many of the people during the colonialism time were either raped or forced on or brutally, made sex slave, if I might say so. It happened. It was documented. So anytime as a Black person you want to date someone that is not Black, or even within the Black society, that will basically say, oh no, you better be careful because this is not your ethnicity. Stop it. So white people, don't take it wrong. It's actually within the Black society as well. If you are not with the same ethnicity, sometimes the Black parents may actually see that as something wrong that you're doing, dating somebody out of your your ethnicity. So it's not just the race thing, it's even with ethnicity. Because I had that, my parents basically said to me, oh no, they're not the same social stature as you. Why are you dating them? And she's a lovely girl. That has nothing to do with them. So this is basically something that people don't tend to understand in African society.
So at least to me, if you have personal racial preferences in dating, that's fine because that's aligned with who you are attracted to, who you're not, and there are factors affecting that, but it's harder to cope with. But if there are racial preferences from one's parents or from people outside of yourself that are not related to your own, who are you attracted to? Now that strikes me as something that's more aligned with what's immoral, right? Because that is an imposition of the value structure on top of someone else's.
That's exactly it. But that's exactly it, Brian. If you don't mind, I will just jump in. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So personally, if it's your choice, that's fine, because we all have principles. But when somebody is imposing that on you, then it's different. So I'm pretty sure you heard about forced marriages, especially in Asia or Southeast Asia. So those, for me, are immoral. That's the point I was basically going to come to at the end. Let's not confuse about my sexual preferences when it comes to race than something that is imposed on me against my will. That happened in African society. That is wrong. That is immoral. But if it's me choosing to date somebody different race or different culture, then for that is my preference. And it's nothing wrong with something that you choose to do, as long as it's not harming anybody in that sense. This is what I'm trying to explain, that, sometimes in Africa, people misunderstood the sexual preferences than the immorality of what your families or the society imposed on you to date somebody with your own ethnicity, which is wrong. And you get that in India. I'm pretty sure I've got many Indian friends here. They say that. You get that in Southeast Asia. You get that in continental Asia. And you also get that in places like Bangladesh, Pakistan. Many of my friends here have talked about it, and which is wrong. And it's mainly because of my own experience in Africa. As I said, me personally, my parents were basically not happy with the girl that I was dating. And I'm talking about this so that people will understand. So if a white man said to me, oh, I don't want my daughter to marry a Black person, I totally understand, because my family as well will say that. But it's immoral. It's immoral. It's up to the girl to say to the parents, you know what, get the hell off my back. It's my choice. I can marry who I want, stay out of it. Same thing I did with my family. Nobody has to tell you how to live your life.
Nice. Anyone else has to add before I tie a few things down together? Soraya, go for it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Shams. And I think that the harm principle is definitely a good way of looking at whether there's any point to labeling something as moral or immoral, because if it's something that doesn't harm other people, and if it's something that just a personal, let's just say, preference to make it easier to get along with this discussion, then in theory it might seem like the case where it shouldn't have any bearing. And I'm inclined to just let people have their own preferences and make their own decisions for themselves and stuff like that. I do think that intention matters. So if we were to compare the case between a white American person, for example, and their parents forbid them from getting together with someone who is of a certain race, let's say someone who's African American, then the intention behind that, is it the same as the intention behind let's say, Filipino parents not allowing their child to marry someone who is, let's say, um, Indonesian and Muslim, right? So the intention matters, I think. So that's another question. And at the same time, I think when it comes to where I was going with when talking about the harm principle, right, was at an individual level, it seems fine. And I think it is indeed fine for you to have your own personal preferences, which you keep to yourself, and no one has to know about whether you have a certain fetish for someone of a certain race. If it's something that you indeed cannot control, then it's like, what do you do with that, right? So I think if it's something that you sincerely cannot control, then fine. But oftentimes what happens is that people end up normalizing these things in ways that might end up causing harm upon other people. One example off the top of my head is, it's fine if one person only wants to date exclusively within someone of their own race, and they are of the majority race. But if they were to indicate this dating preference on their dating app bio, and then more people see this and think that it's okay to have an exclusionary racial criteria that's explicitly stated on the dating bio, then it might end up creating an environment where it's hostile or inconducive for someone who's not of that race. So there's the question of how far, is something really just an individual choice?
Right. Okay, so I guess individually we do not want to police it, but then what are the implications that will come out of it, right? And also I'd like to touch upon, like, recently there was a study done. So they basically transcribed everyone's political leanings on a dating app called OKC. And they found out that liberals were actually explicitly less biased than conservatives in announcing their racial biases. But however, upon tracking their dating activity and things that they will actually act upon, they found that even though the liberals had less explicit biases towards any race, the outcomes of who they chose based on race did not differ in comparison to the conservatives. So this begs the question, right? Like, even if we can agree that it's immoral and wrong, what can we do about it at an individual and on a societal level? And also, just to touch back on Pariah's previous statement on how we cannot just copy paste the whole sexual orientation and racial preferences thing. Like, I totally agree. Like, for instance, like, researchers from Nature, which is a scientific publication, found that there is no gay gene currently existing. But that does not mean like being gay is choice, right? The same way your alleles and environment interact to becoming open to the idea of same-sex behavior probably also resonates from that kind of same token. Is what I'm getting at. But your culture, the media that you consume, for instance, like we see in Hollywood, black men are fetishized as strong, primal, raw sexual energy and this chunk of manliness, whereas Asians are typically more portrayed as sexless geeks, weirdo nerds with like ultra virgin vibes. It is obvious that the tropes are there and very real, right? The problem now comes in understanding, like, what do these things kind of mean? And if we kind of agree that racial fetishization is okay, right, aren't we then playing into the stereotypes of racists? Go for it.
I
Uh,
was someone gonna go?
you can go ahead first.
Okay.
Cheers, man.
All right. I just want to make a quick point about the media, which ties in with what I was saying about the difference between a personal individual preference versus something that gets normalized in wider society. And the media has a lot to do with, all these tropes that you're just talking about, Agent P. So that's certainly something to talk about. Singadoomer, you can go.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. So one thing that I just like to add on is that you mentioned about the conservatives and liberal thing, right? But the thing is, if you boil it deep down, everyone dates who they want to date, all right? Like I say, it's a physical attraction that brings people together. It's just that I believe that the conservative people are more vocal about it rather than, like liberals, they try to hold up their, myself, I'm apolitical, right? I don't really give a shit about left or right whatsoever. But I just think that many people who lean towards the left, they don't want to be vocal about their choices in fear of being, I don't know, appearing racist or whatsoever.
Virtue signaling. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's in fear of being so-called cancelled. But again, like you said, exactly. It's just that it's human nature to feel this way. All right. You see someone, you like them, yeah, you go for it. All right. And to add on the thing, like to what SJ said, like for like short-term relationships and hookups, yeah, exactly. You're not pursuing a relationship, and if the other party is consenting, yeah, sure, it's nice, but it would be weird. Like for example, it would be weird to mention race when you're particularly chasing after that person. Like let's say I fetishize big foreheads. I wouldn't go up to a lady and like, hey, I really like a big forehead. Let's do. I wouldn't say something like that. So it's more like being subtle about it, but at the same time, like he said, if it's a short-term thing and both parties are consenting, that's fine. Yeah, no one has any business about it. That's perfectly fine. However, I just want to mention that, like in some cases, that these fetishized relationships, at least from what I saw, like I can only think of 3 people whom I know have been in these so-called fetishized relationships, and all of them were abusive one way or another. Yeah. I mean, even one more thing I want to add is this more of a personal thing. Like, when it comes to dating interracially, especially since I moved here, especially when I first moved to Scotland, like last September, there were a couple of times where I felt like I was a diversity hire to some people. So yeah, I mean, I didn't feel anything about it. In fact, I felt, oh, sweet, it's just another hookup or whatsoever. But nah, things flutter here and there. So can you say much? Yeah, that's me.
That's I just want to follow on that. Really, that's a great point, Singadoomer. I love it. I love it. Both you and Priya went ahead and basically made it clear, and this is something that I totally agree with. I would also like to add on personal note. Maybe this might be another way of bringing a conversation. I think you personally wanting to date somebody out of your race do not make you racist, as you ask Agent P, but racial, I would think. Racial, not racist. Not East, but show.
Racial
infringement.
Making a racial infringement, but not being racist.
Yeah, so I'm basically saying that makes you racial, but not racist. You are not racist for wanting to date a specific group of people, race or a group type of individual, but you're racial, not racist. But if someone for their belief or religious belief or cultural belief are trying to stop you from dating somebody, then they are being racist. Because that's not your point of view. They're trying to implement their views or their belief on you. But you choose to date someone not because of the race, but because of racial. That basically means that a physical or a characteristic or if I might say, the shared ancestry. So is that basically wrong? That's entirely up to that person. It's a humankind thing and sometimes divided on the basis of physical or characteristic or shared ancestry. But if you choose to date in that area, would that make you someone that is racist? But somebody might debate about that. But you know why you're dating them, because you're attracted to them, as both, Singadoomer and Priya mentioned earlier, and SJ also mentioned it. You decide to date someone because of you are attracted to them. Love is blind, as they say. And you have physical attraction to them, not race or not ethnicity. You don't care about what kind of color they are. You are attracted to them because you want to sleep with them. This is where I'm going. The first insect is a lush. You know, you have a lust for them, not their skin color. Sorry, SJ wants to come in. I think I'll stop here.
Oh, sorry, I was going to wait for you to finish. I just wanted to sort of comment that I think this anxiety around racial preferences and whether they're okay and whether you should only date your own race or everyone or only other races, etc. I feel like this is a very American anxiety. Like this is part of sort of American liberal racial politics. And I don't really feel like, obviously it's spreading because of Americanization, especially I can speak to the gay community and the gay community. But I don't think these anxieties really exist outside of coastal USA. And I mean, you can sort of see them impacting dating internationally because, of course, a lot of like these dating apps, when we were talking about dating apps earlier, are American or at least primarily American. And I remember this was perhaps a couple of years ago. I'm not quite sure now. Time's basically a blur since the pandemic. But I remember a bunch of the apps, both mixed sexuality and gay dating apps, actively removed the ability to filter by race. And I think the only app, at least that I've tried, that still has the ability to filter by race is Hinge. And they got a lot of criticism for refusing to remove it. And I think whilst it is kind of cringe and inappropriate, and it does create a hostile environment to list your racial preferences on your profile, as someone mentioned before, I think that having filters like hidden filters behind the scenes that aren't public based on who you see and who can see you, I think that works, both in terms of satisfying your own personal preferences. But if you, for instance, I'm white, right? And it's probably for the best that if someone doesn't want to date any white people, that we just don't see each other, and just accepting that. And I think that's the best way to go about it. So I think these apps sort of got onto this sort of American liberal fervor and made all these decisions to actually make their dating products inferior and less functional. In terms of fetishization, as we touched on before as well, like I admit I have racial preferences, but if I'm in a relationship with someone, if I'm looking more like longer term, it's not based entirely on their race. Like I would be lying if I said that it wasn't something that factored into my initial attraction, because it's not the only thing. There are multiple things in attraction. I think someone touched on that as well. Like, do they look after themselves? Do they go to the gym? Do they have good hygiene, etc.? And I'll be lying if I said that, things like race, which, do depend what you look like, didn't have an impact on whether I was attracted to them. But there's never a reason why I would have a relationship with someone, like the sole reason. They have to, still be, a good person and have other qualities that I find attractive. But I'm just sort of wrapping this point up in that I think it's just a feature of American racial politics that's sort of being exported. And I'm not entirely sure if it's really relevant to the wider world.
Right, you're an American.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that? Yeah.
I think I think my experiences here is, if you look at a place like Australia, it seems like most of Australia is pretty white, and it feels like to me a place like Australia is very they're not as willing to budge for other races. It feels like, even though it seems like the people are like Americans, or maybe more so like Americans, and I think it's because they aren't that melting pot. They didn't start as like the melting pot of places where immigrants came, right? It was mostly white British folks that kind of got put there as the penal colony. And I think that to your point is SJ, is about the politicalization of race is just, I guess, it's just something that's always happened in America, right? Because we just have so many races. 130 years ago, the Irish were the bad race to be, and then 90 years ago the Italians, and now it's the Latin Americans. That's the race that's down. So I think I think this whole racial politicking is really based on just who's in power, what race is in power, the preferred
Fred,
race.
you forgot to mention the African Americans. I have to pull you on that one. Sorry.
Well, no, that's
Well,
been for hundreds and hundreds of years. So
yeah.
but again, in the U.S., it's like the African Americans always get the shit end of the stick, no matter what. So no matter who else is the next one, it's always they get the shit end of the stick. So I don't really think I had a whole point there, but I just wanted to make that differentiation is why we're maybe different than you don't see it in other countries like Australia, is because we were always a melting pot rather than like a country like Australia, which was a little more homogenous, a little more, I would say much more, but mostly more.
Okay, and back onto the point about like the whole racial fetishization thing. Like I was mentioning, like for Shams, for instance, right? Like we are noticing a trend to sexualizing black males in the media. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing is another thing, but where does it come to like a point where it becomes too toxic, where the average black male who sees all of these kinds of media feels kind of alienated from all these kind of stereotypes? What if they don't have a BBC? What if they are not 6 feet tall, manly, and whatever the media tries to sexualize them or portrays them at? Do you not see that then as becoming problematic itself? And this is just moving away from the whole racial fetishization thing, but yeah, just the media portraying you guys as that. What do you feel? Yeah,
I feel that it's a misconception, really. It doesn't matter what color you are. You can have probably the biggest fucking dick, excuse my language, or you can have the tiniest dick. That's just something normal. You can be gay, heterosexual, whatever it is. That is just, I don't know, silly. Same thing that they say, yeah, a man's dick size is the size of his feet. All that is bullshit. That's just humans, I don't know, trying to make up whatever they wake up in the morning, they want to basically make the world, I don't know, a little bit more confused. They create shit. But I do, however, like to comment on the fact that, I like the fact that you said media is trying to make black men more, sexualizing black men. But just here among us, let me ask you, how many black men have received Men of the Year, sexiest men alive, I don't know, any of those magazines, So that's something. It's different. The media do not sexualize black men. It's the dating sites, or maybe, I don't know, any woman who has a fantasy of having a black man will basically start creating things. It's all about rumors. So all these are not academic research. Yes, you might think that black men during the slave trade are trained to be the fittest to get there, because the conditions they are living in the slave boats are horrible, and you have to be really to the top of your DNA chain to survive to get to America. Because nobody, even here, we're traveling on airplane these days for 12 hours, we complain. Imagine being in a boat, chain, sleeping in feces and urine and everything. You're stuck in there for a few months. By the time when you get there, you start working straight away. So you have to be top form to be able to do so. But that does not apply to mean that, yeah, that's also right, that black men has to perform good in bed. No, many of the women that I see or that I spoke to, I said, that's basically a myth. A white man can have the biggest dick, a Chinese man can have the biggest dick, and an African man can have the biggest dick. That is not something that we have to discuss. But the problem is, when they're talking about sexy man alive in the media, how many are Chinese, are Asian? How many are Africans compared to the West? So you are trying to say that someone is sexy by race, but at the same time, when you're dating somebody, you're dating them because you think they might be better in bed. How is that contradictory to you guys? I'm sorry, I answer you by by asking you a question. How is that basically compared to that? Hollywood is telling you something, but when you go to date or do something, they are telling you something. Which one is the truth? Go figure.
So I think if I could jump in, there are a few points that I want to kind of touch on, and to just address what Shams was just talking about. I think that's such a great question, because it goes back to the idea of what the media kind of normalizes and what values the media sells to the rest of us, and how that interacts with our own individual preferences, right? So there's a question of whether the media should be responsible, or should it be held to a higher kind of moral standard, since we were talking about the question of whether these preferences are moral or immoral earlier on. But something else I also wanted to say was, I found was it SJ who talked about how the anxiety around racial preferences are a very American, like liberal American racial politics kind of idea. So I'm not sure how much I agree with that. I think I don't fully agree, but I think SJ was definitely onto something, in that I'm talking specifically about the anxieties around racial politics. Okay, so not racial politics per se, but like how people, I guess, hyperfixate on whether it is moral, immoral to have these preferences, and how we try to send a whole message through dating apps, not allowing people to filter based on race. So the anxieties in particular are something that I think is interesting to talk about, because I think so this is just, I guess, personal observation, and like from having read a certain number of, I guess, articles and books and stuff like that. I think when American media or American, like, I guess, discourse focuses on whether it's okay to have racial preferences, it often misses the mark, and doesn't really go to the full extent of asking deeper questions about race. And it tends to be stuck at the level of analysis where it's to do with individual actions and individual preferences. And it tends to be, I hesitate to call it an American thing, because I do think that in the rest of the world, these are questions that we would be thinking about, regardless of whether American racial politics came into the picture or not. And all over the world, there's always been interactions between people of different races. So that's a thing. So is there then a fetishization, not just of people for their race, but fetishization around the whole question of what is moral or immoral when it comes to love and dating and sex?
Shams, if I could just respond like really quickly to your points about because I guess you kind of disagree with the premise that there is that fetishization going on. And then I do not really understand your big yardstick of measurement with the sexiest man in the world. But I can point you to other like empirical data. Like if we look at interracial porn, especially like if you go to the term like black on Pornhub or something, those like empirical data has shown, like with actual statistics, like over the past 5-10 years, interest has risen a lot. Sorry, I'm just a connoisseur of those websites. Just anyways, if we look at other things, I can point you to like Rocky, those boxing movies. Now it's become there's so much demand for that, portraying that strong male black lead, right? Michael B. Jordan. Even look at the Avengers, how they had a whole franchise, celebrating blacks and black culture with Wakanda. And next, they're even thinking of having Idris Elba as the next James Bond, the pinnacle of sexiness right there. So even if we don't agree that now the dynamics is kind of changing in the media, do you still feel that it is okay if that we can agree that the media portrays you guys as such that it is morally acceptable? Because you know what, it serves me to my benefit. Yeah, go for it. And then SJ.
Right. Thank you very much. You're right, indeed. And we also, in case people don't know, I don't want to spoil it, we also have the new Doctor Who as a black man. So that's, I don't know who are fans, who watch Doctor Who. Well, probably SJ might know what Doctor Who is, but also people who are abroad might watch, who are in sci-fi might know who Doctor Who is. So we also have a new black Doctor Who, but I don't think Idris Elba will be the new James Bond. So that one is in the thing, is gone in the wind. Yeah, so you just mentioned two, basically famous black actors, which is good. But it's always when it comes to, you know, how many black people do you name as scientists? It's when it comes to films or when it comes to sport. So where I'm going with this is I'm sapiosexual, you know. I don't really care much about somebody who is in a film or who is in a sports. Those are basically like the role model we have. Who are the role model that we have in science, in education, innovations? You know, how many? You name it. The only person that they can name for you is maybe Mike, you know, the deGrasse Tyson. And, you know, even him, he is known as the guy who demoted Plato. You know, people hate him for that. I'm not saying that they are not, but not many people knows a black intelligent person. It's only sexualized like in the films because you've got a six-pack, or in the sports because you can run fast. So for me, that is not a role model. As I said again, I'm sapiosexual. So from my point of view, the media is not doing us favor. And worse, the people on dating side to say that, yeah, I had a black man last night, he was big and he was good. But you didn't have all black men, you only had one. So you can't generalize one black man that you had in your bed and think that, yeah, that's all black men are the same. It's wrong. For me, that is wrong. So again, from a view of someone who is sapiosexual, I think that the media is not representing us well. They are not doing us any favor. And up to recently, you know, that's basically up to the 90s, no black person has ever been nominated in the Oscars or anything apart from Sidney Poitier. He's the only black man, you know. So talking about Hollywood and the media and everything up the way till now, even if somebody did something wrong, instead of saying, I don't know in America, but here they basically said, you know, his origin, where he comes from. If he's from Africa or if he's from West Indies, they have to say it in the media if a black man has done something. That's not quite the point. No, if he's born in English, he raised in English, they still do that. I don't know if you realize that recently, all the people that came here and started living and working during the Second World War, they basically tried to ship them away. So for us, it's not about sexualizing people in the media to say, oh yeah, this person is sexy, he's black. But no, you don't have to say that he's black because he's, you don't have to say he's sexy because he's black. Just say that he's sexy because he's an individual. The same way you don't say, he's a white man, he's sexy. Why do they not do that? That's the point that I was trying to make. Sorry, I think this guy has got his hands up.
SJ, Jorge, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I just need to make this point, and then I actually have to go. So sorry, I'm just gonna just quickly get to this. I just wanted to reply to the earlier point about Americanization. I think the problem is in the gay community as well, in particular, is there's so much gay culture and gay dating and gay sense of identity. It's so heavily Americanized throughout the world that it's almost kind of hard to say, you know, what is an American quality and what isn't. I mean, you know, you can really identify this problem when most, I can only speak really from my perspective, an English perspective, but you know, most English gay men will know about Stonewall and the Stonewall riots, for instance, which happened over the US, but they won't know anything about the gay rights movement that began earlier, like the Wolfenden Report, which laid the foundations for the decriminalization of homosexuality, happened quite a bit before the Stonewall riots. If anything, we were ahead of America on this. And you know, most gay English people are kind of ignorant of their own culture, their own sort of history, and refer more to an American gay culture, and specifically in most cases a sort of West Coast gay culture, which isn't even applicable throughout most of the US. I think all I can think about is that in my experience traveling, I've been very fortunate to travel to a lot of places and in some countries that are almost completely disconnected from US culture, such as non-major cities in China. And just from my experience is that there aren't these anxieties about racial preferences the further you get detached from American gay culture. Like, in my experience, traveling to, small towns in Malaysia or where homosexuality is even illegal and people are very discreet, or, non-tier one cities in China, is that people are very open with their sexual preferences and don't feel ashamed by that. And of course, there is a degree of stereotyping as well. But, these, I did meet gay men who were very obviously only into me just because I am, all white ginger and different. But it wasn't something that they were anxious about. I wasn't getting hung up on it and I accepted it for what it is. And I think that I'm not really sure where I was going with this point, but I guess it's more that I do really feel like it is an American problem, and we only really seen it in outside of starting to come to gay communities outside of the US because we import so much of our gay culture from this West Coast liberal gay community, things like knowing more of their history than their own sort of social justice causes, their own like sort of interests like drag race and so on. And I just feel like it's not really relevant outside of the US discourse on race because, as someone mentioned earlier, as the American on this chat mentioned earlier, it's because of the unique racial history of the US why it's such a prevalent discussion. And I'm just not sure it's really really relevant, and we're sort of importing this anxiety that we don't really need to. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it there. I do have to go now. Yeah, thank you for having me.
SJ, before you go quickly, that's a really great point. I just want to touch on the African point. I don't know if you mentioned Asia and America. I don't know if you've ever been to Africa. Many people don't know much about that, but we can basically chat separately. If you want, get my number from Nick, or we can organize another thing. I will give you a perspective point when it comes to homosexuality in Africa, because for many people, it's untold and it's unknown. Many people don't know about it, or they think it's taboo, or it's permitted. They don't know. Sorry, I just want to put that there, SK.
Yeah, no, I actually have never been to Africa. In terms of my understanding of gay Black men, at least those living in the West, is, they're stereotyped into an expectation of being the top, of being an aggressive, dominant partner. And when someone doesn't fit into that mold, it's actually quite controversial. You mentioned the Doctor Who being a Black guy. He's actually also gay, a gay Black male. And he was in a very popular show set here in the UK called Sex Education. And in there he plays, I think he plays, quite a flamboyant, excuse me, sorry, quite a flamboyant character, and I know there was controversy around that. Because the expectation
he's actually African. He's a victim. He's an African, I think. Or he came here as a refugee.
Yeah, and he's quite a flamboyant character anyway, but he put it up a notch on Sex Education and was quite feminine. And I know there was some controversy, not controversy, but there was sort of some people were confused by that because there's expectation as a gay Black man that you have to be this aggressive top. But yeah, no, that would definitely be interesting to explore that. I can only really comment on my own experiences traveling.
And that's fine. But I think Britain still has to do its bit, because still homosexuality is not talked when it comes to football. Many footballers are still hidden. So that's another issue. Anyway, there are so many issues that I'm not the expert. I'm not homosexual, but I would like to talk about them. Same way that the people misunderstood in Africa, the same problem that is happening. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's not entirely pleasant being gay. I mean, sometimes I joke that I'm a refugee from my hometown because my hometown is in the arse end of nowhere in the north of England, where it's definitely not okay to be gay, especially not when I grew up in the noughties. And I think, it's really great in London and perhaps up in Edinburgh. But a lot of the UK is pretty unpleasant to be gay still. But yeah, I'm really sorry, but I do have to dash. But it was nice to chat with everyone on this.
Cheers, SJ. Take care.
See you soon.
All right. Just for closing, I like to kind of think of these things in terms of framework and like how I kind of gather the views and like kind of form thoughts on my own and reading through and journals. I came across this interesting framework, which I think we most likely will be able to kind of agree on. So it flows like this, right? So premise one is like we have a duty to give all people of races a fair chance to date. Touching on what Brian has mentioned before, a person is so much more than their race, their political leanings, their interests, their hobbies, so on and so forth, right? Premise two, so failing to accomplish this threshold would then constitute a moral failing and it's reprehensible. So like, for instance, if you are, you may not be interested in blacks or Indians or whatever, but you should at least give them a fair chance. And like if you do, if you're just purely exclusionary based off that, then that will kind of make you racist. But if there are like certain things, like let's say you do give them a fair chance to do so, then you will be still kind of morally reprehensible, but then you will be not considered a racist. And I can go into that a bit more. And then as such, premise three, giving people more than they are morally owed is also morally acceptable. And then you reach the conclusion, which logically follows that we can give certain people more than they are owed because of their race, provided that in doing so we do not fall short of giving a fair chance. So like for one instance, maybe let's say a white guy, he says explicitly like, I will not date any black girls, and then he goes on to maybe prescribe them with like the very old-fashioned stereotypes or beliefs about them, then that what would be then what we call an actual racist, right? But in another example where someone is a bit more nuanced in a sense where they are saying that I have a preference for white girls. I will not really date black girls because they just do not appeal that too much to me, but I have no ill intentions or ill feelings towards them. Then we can say that because they failed premise one, which is giving a fair chance to date based off race, yes, they are like causing they're racial, right? As Shams was saying, they're making a racial infringement, but they're not racist per se. And I think if we equate both terms, or if we just simply oversimplify everything and just consider both these persons as racist, then I think racism or racists kind of lose, or the word racist kind of lose just all kind of meanings. Can we all agree on that, or yeah, go for it. Closing thoughts. Go for it. Anyone? Brian, no?
If you're saying that we should apply a principle of charity to and being open-minded with who we want to date, then I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that, although that's kind of a very low baseline and not particularly going to address a lot of structural issues that some people might face.
Definitely not. Definitely not. But it is more to kind of clarify on the point that, like, how can we sort of have a morally defensible answer to someone who has racial preferences, like, and not be so quick to call them, oh, you're racist because you like this thing and you wouldn't date this because of their race.
Sure, and I do think that even within racial preferences, people will be surprised at who they find attractive, at who works out for them in the end. And so it's to everyone's advantage that people keep a baseline level of openness and fair chance in terms of who they want to accept,
Yeah.
including their own.
Fred?
Yeah, if people are, I guess it's more of a statement than answering your question. If people do keep an open mind, they will be surprised at who they end up with at the end of the day. For instance, myself, quite surprised. I would never thought I would be with this person, but because I was open-minded to go on some dates and meet this person, I think I'm much better off. I mean, I know I'm much better off than I would be otherwise. So, because of that open-mindedness. So, yeah, I guess that's just more of a personal statement than maybe agreeing to the point that you presented. But yeah.
Champs Pore, go for it.
Oh yeah. Let me just start to say that love is beautiful and love is so messy. So honestly, I hope everyone agrees about this. You know, you fall in love, you're in a total mess, but it's the most incredible feeling. And anyone, in my view, who basically thinks that they are in love with someone, they are in love with somebody because of the race or their skin color, for me, that is not appropriate. I would think that you fall in love with somebody because of their characters, because of, yeah, the physical part is there, you know, how person look first, and then you get to know their characters and their intentions, you know, then you fall in love. But all the same, I think that in society, as a Black person, I will say that we have the wrong end of the stick, because if you take any races, whenever your daughter or your son bring a Black man or a Black girl at home, that is seen already as a racial thing by the parents. I'm talking as a person of experience. They will see that as a race thing before even they start mentioning, you know, seeing the person's character. It's difficult for a Black person to date any other race on earth. And that's simply due to the perspective and the narrative that has been running around the world for the race differences. This is something that I've observed. This is something that I've witnessed. This is something that I've experienced. And I'm talking as a person of lived experience of these things. You know, person might think, no, it's not always about race, but yes, for me, it is. I have basically been asked, as soon as I open my, where are you from? You're not from an African country where there is war or where there is something, you know, straight away. Or are you with my daughter because you want to impregnate them so that you can stay in UK? You see, these are the things. Or are you with my daughter? Are you one of the gang members or something like that? And, or they will basically ask, oh, you're not going to see this as a racist thing, but I just don't want my daughter to date somebody Black. So Asian, Caucasian, you name it, Indians, you guys are basically like, all right, when it comes to dating pool. You know, you can dip your toe, it's fine. But when it comes to Black people, accept it or not, this is the reality that we face in many, many places. I'm not saying everyone is, but it's the norm of the society, how we are viewed, how we are perceived in the society. And simply due because of slavery, because of colonialism, because of the continual imperialism that is happening in Africa. Nobody wants to date an African person because they're not helping themselves, or they're basically being treated like shit in the whole wide world. You know, in brackets, I'm basically simplifying things, but it's not the case. There are many white people who would love to basically date a Black person. There are many Asian people who would love to date a Black person. But in general, we need to start changing our perspective when it comes to race dating. Apart from that, the most intelligent kids are basically when two DNA is combined. You know, Asian kid and a black kid, or a white kid or an Asian kid, or a white kid and a black kid. The DNA, when they mix, basically, God knows what those genes can basically produce, because it's the multitude of two genes combining, the difference of two genes combining, and God knows what intelligent kid that can be provided. You know, statistically or scientifically, that has been proven, the mix of two genes can be beneficial, never a downfall. Apart from that, the last final thing that I want to bring is people should always remember that if you're falling in love with somebody, it's because of something specific you like in them. So whatever it is, the race or something, or their intelligence or their characters, that should basically not be dictated by somebody else. Then it becomes a wrong thing. If somebody will tell you, oh, date this person because he's black or because he's white, that's wrong. It's up to you to judge. At the end of the day, you're a human being, you have feelings, you have characters, you can judge yourself who to love or who to like. So it's up to you. We shouldn't let somebody else dictate for us who we should be or who we should date. You wouldn't let somebody basically tell you, go sleep here, just sleep there, or don't sleep there. No. You have your own personality. Try to be your own person. Do not let people dictate to you. Whenever you see something like that is happening, speak up if you can. Simple as that. Wrong is wrong, no matter who does it. It doesn't matter who does it or who done it. Wrong is wrong. Speak about it.
Powerful. Poraya, would you like to wrap it up for the rest of us?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for ending on that note, Shams. I think it is very true that all of us are still working within a paradigm that's very recently been, freed from the clutches of colonialism, and we're still working on the afterlives of colonialism and imperialism, and many of these effects continue to live on. But I think the most powerful part of what you were saying, Shams, was your statement on how love is messy. And I think love, lust, attraction, all these things evade any objective kind of way of measuring or assessing or quantifying any part of it. So it's very hard to say, oh, like I am dating this person because of a specific thing. And I would like to think that people don't date other people specifically because of their race. So I think racial dating preferences really is a big misnomer. But something that I wanted to get to was the fact that the whole thing with racial preferences, I think, probably comes from a desire to make something that's so messy and so incomprehensible a bit more tangible. And I think it ends up doing it for the worse rather than for the better. I think that when we have all these limitations when it comes to the people that we date, I mean, at the end of the day, the ones that we are really shortchanging are ourselves. And we are just limiting ourselves to a certain range of the spectrum. If people are okay with that for themselves, then sure. But I think something that I also wanted to touch on was that I think I'm interested in the question of race and dating and all of these things, not in a way that's meant to come up with a code or a set of rules that allows people to tell whether something is moral or immoral. I think it's really just, as human beings, we should be honest with ourselves, and it's really a question that we owe to ourselves to ask, rather than something that we should come up with definitions in order to police people's standards and shoot people down for their dating history and whatever. So I definitely think that we should take care not to end up trying to come up with another set of rules that ends up being more harmful than productive. So these conversations definitely important to have, definitely fruitful to have, but yeah, also important to not let it go the other way.
Lovely stuff. Thank you guys so much for coming. I didn't know how this conversation would have went with all of you guys being in this room, but like I think it took a while for the free flow dialogue to kind of get rolling, but we got there eventually, and a lot of insights were shared. And once again, I appreciate you guys for coming down. I'm just gonna stop the recording, just wave and bye bye.